But now we got to do our quick picks for our new top 25. Here's that list once again to remind you of who we got. And here is the new graphic for week 9. We're going to go through every single one of these games. So let's start with that bottom half. Navy hosting FAU. The Midshipmen are 14.5 point favorites. It's an early kickoff on Saturday between, again, Navy and the Owls. FAU really hasn't been much of anything this past season. They lost to FIU in the Shula Bowl. Last week, they got belt to cheeks against USF. I would think it's going to be very similar against Navy. I just don't think the point difference that USF put up last week is going to be met by, again, the Midshipmen. 14.5 points, that might be a little realistic for Navy to achieve, especially even it being a home game. FAU traveling there all the way up to Maryland, Annapolis. So, yeah, it's an easy pick, I would say. Navy all the way there. Virginia, they head over to Chapel Hill, taking on the Tar Heels. The Cavaliers are favored by 10 points. Pretty interesting. I think they're going to more than cover there. Even though North Carolina showed a little bit of life against Cal this past weekend on the road over there in Berkeley for a Friday night game. But here against Virginia, a very good run team who barely survived against Washington State, but Wazoo there also did that to Ole Miss the week before. So it kind of makes a little bit of sense of why teams are struggling against them. They're kind of like the Auburn of the West Coast or Arkansas. But here against North Carolina, I think they're going to be able to more than cover. We're also going to be picking them very easily there in Chapel Hill. Next up, we have Arizona State hosting Houston. Tough game, to be honest, to pick. I know Arizona State is favored by a decent amount of points, 8.5. I think that will drop by kickoff, and we'll revisit that number on Wednesday when we do every single game. But we were already going to go with Arizona State at home against anybody here in the Big 12. They did that last season and helped them get all the way to the Big 12 championship game and won. Here against Houston should be a nice fight. I would think it'd be a similar result that we saw earlier this season when the Sun Devils hosted TCU. And I don't think they're going to be covering their 8.5 points. Yeah, I would stay away from that for sure. But ultimately, Sun Devils there in Tempe. Texas, they go over to Starkville, take on good old Mississippi State. Texas's offensive line is an absolute mess right now. We've already talked about that for our watch along. Going into the Cotton Bowl just was not a good outing for the Longhorns there. And this game should be another nail biter because if you can't run between the tackles there in that offense, you can't really run Steve Sarkisian's scheme whatsoever. And there's kind of not like a mid-season, and I'm sounding like the bald man with a white shirt over at Pate State. But unfortunately, there isn't a mid-season transfer portal. And they're having to move around pieces. That left guard position has been just a revolving door for them this season. And I don't think they will be solving anything soon. And yeah, that -6.5, that is for the Longhorns. I don't think they cover there on the road, but ultimately, I think they do get the job done against the Bulldogs. We keep moving to Tennessee, heading over to Lexington, play Kentucky. We're going to go with the Volunteers very easily there. I think their offense can score a decent amount of points. Kentucky has made a quarterback switch, I think maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago now. We did that in-depth preview between them and Ole Miss. And boy, we did not miss on that one. As the offense did an alright job. But here against Tennessee, who has a pretty decent run defense against weaker teams when they come up against in the SEC. And yeah, that's where I think Kentucky will have that 9-point difference most likely be put on them, as that is the line being set for this nightcap game on Saturday. So yeah, I think Tennessee can definitely cover that 9 points, and on top of that, they will be winning on the road. Illinois versus Washington is up next. We are going to go with Illinois. Coming off a nice bye, but it's going to be a tough one. They are not favorites, even though they will be the ranked team and going into this game. -5 for UW. They're in Seattle. But they do have Luke Altmaier. Pretty decent offensive line. Fagan, their running back, also pretty solid. I would say Altmaier and his receiving core have been pretty impressive, as last season he lost 2 guys to the NFL. Has been able to, reload somewhat. And has a pair of tight ends also there as well. The defense, that's where it's going to really come down to. Shutting down Damon Williams there for Washington, the quarterback. He might cause some issues early on, but over time, I think Illinois will eventually adjust and overcome, and most likely wins, even though they're not the favorite. So we're technically going against the grain. We'll see that line though throughout the week, and talk about it more on Wednesday to see if it flips. Next up is Cincinnati taking on Baylor. They're at home. Cincy, they've just been consistent. Did have that week 1 loss to Nebraska, but ever since have been perfect. And it's also another game where the ranked team is not favored, which makes absolutely no sense. Baylor, they just got kind of whacked last week to TCU, as they did close down the difference, but technically should have lost by probably multiple possessions. So it kind of just doesn't make much sense of why they're favored, but it is Vegas. Sometimes they don't get enough sleep, and I don't think they slept on this one enough. We're going to go Cincinnati for sure, unless there's some kind of injury that I have missed. I haven't seen any crazy updates. Brendan Sorsby, that running back that mowed down a bunch of Iowa State guys a couple of weekends ago. There's not been anything crazy, so kind of makes no sense of why Baylor would be favored. But yeah, we're gonna go Cincinnati, as their offense should be overwhelming a very weak Baylor defense there. Up next, we have USF heading over to Memphis. This is a tricky one. USF is only favored by 4. I think Memphis is going to put up probably the best fight that we have seen against USF outside of the Miami game. And yeah, I definitely could see this game be just a 1 possession difference. I think that's also why the line is being set, as USF is on the road. But ultimately, yeah, the Bulls will win probably around like 9 points, I would say, by the end of the day. So that means they technically cover for this early kickoff on Saturday. So yeah, let's go USF. David Brown. What is next? The final game. That is Miami hosting Stanford. This is the biggest margin that we come up against so far on all these top 25 games, as the Hurricanes are favored by 30 points. 30. I think last week it was very similar going into the Stanford Florida State game. Florida State loses. I don't think it's going to be the same story here, but we get to see Elijah Brown most likely get the starts. Goldberson, who I've been hoping and praying that they eventually sit. Well, the prayer comes in a different form. If he's out for an extended time because of that injury he picked up against Florida State, this might be the moment Elijah Brown gets to, run that offense for a full game. And we'll see if they can expose Miami. But most likely not. I think this game is going to be a lot closer than 30 points. But I could be wrong, because there's a reason why everyone is so high on Miami scoring that amount in the difference. I think they're going to win still, but I don't think they cover that 30-point spread. That is the bottom half. We're going to get into now the top half of the top 25. And that takes us to number 12, Georgia Tech, who is the highest ranked ACC school in our top 25. Haven't really beat anybody impressive or impressively as well. So that's why we have them there at number 12. I know the AP has them in the top 10. Not deserving yet. Really, Miami shouldn't have been in the top 10. Last week kind of proved it. But for the highest ranked Atlantic Coast Conference game, they will be playing Syracuse there in Atlanta. Favored by 18 points against the Orange. I don't think they cover as well there. Georgia Tech has kind of been just surviving, it feels like. Last week, I know it was 27-18, but it wasn't a very good Duke team that they played. I remember a couple weeks ago, before the Virginia Tech game, they played Wake Forest and got out alive there on the road. So this Georgia Tech team, they're going to lose one of these conference games eventually. They will not end the regular season with a perfect record in conference, and then on top of that, they will be losing to Georgia some way, somehow, no matter what, which means they're going to be a 2-loss team. That's going to put them probably right outside the playoff picture, but the only way they get in would be winning the ACC title. Here against Syracuse, they should be winning the game. The Orange have been atrocious, like disgusting, horrible, every other word you can think of that would just describe bad. Since Steve Angeli has suffered that season-ending injury against Clemson, no offense whatsoever. You just got to feel bad for Fran Brown. I saw a clip of him this past week on the sideline. Just, what is going on? Why did we just keep losing? And there was no backup plan for the quarterback position, it looked like. And yeah, that'll be a bit of the same. Again, 18 points. I don't think Georgia Tech covers, but it'll be a multiple possession win for the Yellow Jackets at the end of the day, and they also win that game. Texas Tech, they will be bouncing back with a nice big blowout against Oklahoma State, as the line has been set at the largest margin of the week here in the top 25. 38.5 points for the Red Raiders going against the Cowboys at home. We have a bit of news to talk about after this about their quarterback Morton, who I don't think is going to be much of an issue if he doesn't play in this game. You have a great freshman quarterback. I think it's Hammond, who kept it pretty close against Arizona State. I think he did a pretty decent job there on the road, and I think Red Raider fans have a lot to look forward to in terms of the amount of years they should be getting out of him. But for this game, should be getting the job done. First off, again, this is the fastest scoring offense in the country, and we should see that, as I think they'll be scoring probably around like 24 points just in the first half alone. And we'll be piling it on there to end it, and most likely get that points difference of 38.5 points against Oklahoma State. The top 10 matchup of the week, that is Vanderbilt hosting Missouri, and this is going to be a very, very good game. For one, Both teams are very excellent at running the ball. Number 2, both teams play decent defense. And number 3, you got Ahmad Hardy on one side of the ball, and you got Diego Pavia on the other sideline. Like, there's just so much to look forward to in this matchup. For me, I'm gonna go Vandy, who are favored by 3. I was gonna go Vandy anyways. They just have been the hot team since that loss to Alabama, and they just been handling business throughout this season here so far. For Missouri, I'm a little worried though of getting it wrong. I think this is the game we'll do one of our in-depth previews on Wednesday for, as I kind of want to dig into the stats and see what I find in terms of the last couple of weeks, because we've already talked about both of these teams quite a bit already this season, again in those in-depth previews. And yeah, this is just going to be probably the best game of the weekend. I don't think it's going to be much of a blowout, but a just close game. Vandy also wants to get one back, as it was a close loss last season there in Columbia. So getting a bit of revenge also is playing into the narrative of why we're picking Vandy there. Number 5, Oregon. They will be taking on Wisconsin there, as I probably should have went to the number 8 team. I think I had these all weird in a weird order. Regardless, that is going to be an absolute massacre there in Eugene. It's the second biggest margin in terms of lines being set. The Ducks are favored by 34.5 points. They'll be also rocking some nice unis that is in collab with the Grateful Dead. So if you're one of those deadheads and you like football, this is a game for you this upcoming weekend. As yeah, they're favored by 34.5. It's going to be complete fireworks. I wonder how many points they're going to be putting up, if it's going to be similar to the Oklahoma State game earlier this season, also there at Autzen Stadium. As I would continue to move to another top 25 matchup, that is Oklahoma hosting Ole Miss. Probably the second best game of the week, I would say. That's an early kickoff game, which is pretty interesting. Definitely going to be tuning in to this one between the Sooners and Rebels. I kind of want to see what Mateer looks like after another week off of that hand injury that he suffered and has been recovering from. Just came up short, or more than coming up short there against Texas. Last week got the job done. Probably a healthy Mateer would have scored maybe another touchdown or 2 against South Carolina. Here against Ole Miss, he's probably just out of it being completely cleared. I'm wondering if he's going to be wearing some kind of hand bandage or thing around his thumb, because all I could remember in that Cotton Bowl was his bleeding hand going into halftime. And I think also Ole Miss's defense will be getting to him quite a bit. And ultimately, that's why we're going to be going with the Rebels on the road. They played excellent against Georgia last weekend in Athens. Just came up short. Georgia wanted it a hell of a lot more. I would think Lane Kiffin needs to have this bounce back win if he wants to get Ole Miss to the playoffs for the first time. And it's very doable against an Oklahoma team that he'll be coming up against. A team that also is struggling to run the ball on top of that. So that's kind of why they haven't been scoring too many points this season. They don't just have, you know, a nice 1-2 punch. They just have John Mateer slinging it and scrambling around for his life. And that's what we should be seeing this upcoming weekend as Ole Miss gets the job done there in Norman. BYU, well, they have an interesting game in Ames, Iowa against the Cyclones. A game where they're not favored against an unranked team. And coming off a very big win that propelled them here at your Sports Outpost deeper into the top 10. They were number 9 last week. Now they're number 7. We have not been sleeping on the Cougars out of Provo whatsoever. They were in our preseason top 25, so that's why they're there at number 7. There's a lot of terrible AP poll voters, and yeah, it is what it is on that. For this game, yeah, I think they get the job done. I think they're going to be extra physical with Iowa State and really bringing it to them. I know the Cyclones blew out Arizona. BYU just survived against them. But there's a thing called Bear Bachmeier, who is an absolute wrecking ball. He made a couple of Utah defenders look absolutely pathetic. There's one play for that touchdown at the end where he hurdled over a Utes defender and then carried 2 more into the end zone with them for a nice touchdown run. We should be seeing that a lot this upcoming weekend against Iowa State. And then on top of that, his ball distribution is a hell of a lot better, as I think it was my first game really watching BYU from front to back on that book against Utah. And yeah, they definitely get the job done, even though they're not favorites on the road. And continue to be undefeated as well. South Carolina. Well, they get to play Alabama next. As Cocktober doesn't look like it's going to be much of a thing. If anything, it's going to be more in November, which I don't know what you would call it. Cocknember? That doesn't really sound right, but you know where I'm getting at with it. Between them and Alabama, Bama, they had just been absolutely wrecking teams. And they most likely wreck South Carolina. Alabama is favored by 13 points. I think they're going to be able to more than cover against the Gamecocks on the road there. And that's why we're also picking them. As Ty Simpson, I believe, is now the favorite there in a lot of Heisman lists. And we move into another top 25 matchup, also in the SEC, and that's Texas A&M going over to Baton Rouge to take on LSU. Boy, is LSU as bad as we thought they were going to be. I think we predicted that they were going to have 4 losses, if I'm not mistaken, for 2025, and well, they won that Clemson game. That would have been one of them. They lost to Ole Miss. That would have been one of them. Last week, didn't expect them to beat Vanderbilt. That was a little surprising, technically, from our offseason mindset. This is one game where we think they were going to lose in the offseason. The other one would have been against Alabama. Yeah, I mean, this one also, when we think about it, it hasn't happened in quite a long time. I think you have to go back to when Texas A&M was actually undefeated, if I'm not mistaken, the last time, which was in 1994, going into week 9, where the Aggies had 0 losses. Would have been, again, a last time since they beat LSU there in Baton Rouge, if I'm not mistaken. Texas A&M fans, correct me if I'm wrong. Which would be big if they can get that over the hump. I think they could get the job done. They're favored by 2.5 points. It's pretty nice to be favored on the road in Baton Rouge there. And I think at the end of the day, they do get the job done. They have the better players in the trenches, even though the defense has been letting up a lot of points. But again, LSU can't run the ball, which means they can't really run the clock or manage time. I think that's kind of been the crutch in this offense this past couple of seasons. And then going back to not being able to run the ball. If you can't run the ball against Texas A&M, like, you're just going to have a bad time. I think that secondary is going to live back up to the hype that they did last season. They gave up 400 yards, if I'm not mistaken, against Garrett Nussmeier. And that was with that NFL caliber offensive line. This offensive line, nowhere near the same level as the 2024 LSU Tiger O-line. So yeah, there's so many reasons of why you don't pick LSU, and that's why we're going A&M. Simple as that. Indiana is the final game, who hosts UCLA, one of the hottest teams in the country. We're going to go, obviously, with Indiana. A little surprised that the margin was at 24 points. I thought the bettors would have been a little bit more kinder to the Bruins. But it is the Hoosiers. They just have one of the best all-around teams, offense and defense. Fernando Mendoza, Heisman favorite right there. On the other side of the ball, you got McClellan, Wyatt. Then you go back to the offense, you got Elijah Sherrod. Then you go back to the defense, you got Isaiah Jones. And then you go back to the offense, you got I'm trying to remember one of their offensive linemen's names, but I can't. I think its last name's Evans. Is the left guard, if I'm not mistaken. And then you go to the opposite side of the ball, you got Lewis Moore. They transfer in from Ole Miss. It's like they just got players everywhere. And Ziggy Cignetti had done an excellent job in the offseason, not only in retaining talent, but also bringing guys in. I think they, just like Texas Tech, did their research and dabbled into the true stats rather than looking at rankings there for portal players. And it's paying off. It's paying off. And yeah, they will be most likely blowing out UCLA. Minus 24 points. That's probably the realistic option. The Bruins, the party is going to be over after this past weekend. We'll see how they bounce back after losing to Indiana, as I'm already expecting them to add it now to an already decent number there in that column. But yeah, that is going to be our predictions going in to the weekend so far. I don't think I'm going to flip any of these.